I realise how lucky I am, because I think I was probably even conceived on a boat, and I grew up naturally just thinking sailing was part of life. My father was a yacht broker. My mother had turned to sailing when all sorts of other things had gone wrong in her life, and so that was simply what we did. And it wasn't until so much later, shamefully so much later, that I realised how many women are either actively excluded from this or never even realise that sailing is open to them. Sailing looks so male. In my book, I would like to suggest that sailing is not so male, and there have been invisible women involved with sailing and all forms of going on the water. Going on the water, like you'll see a beautiful barge in the background. Now, one of the stories in my book is a young woman in the mid-1950s who answered an advertisement to act as a cook and a maid and the mate on a barge like that, working under sail up the East Coast and right up here to what was the Pool of London, carrying all sorts of cargoes and just working that magnificent boat with herself and the skipper, and somehow managing to do this without feeling like a freak. Just I am me, this is what I love doing, I have strength, I have agility, I can do this. And I found that remarkably cheering, because it's women involved with boats, not just for pleasure, but for a livelihood. And I think we must never forget that sailing covers so much. It covers so many different forms of activity, but it also covers trades and adventure and invention. And that's where I think women have been even more startlingly left out than they have from the actual winning races point of view. I particularly love a young woman sailor who I'd never heard of before, who was sailing down on the Solent in the late 1880s, 1890s, just because she was so stroppy, she was so outspoken. She wanted to sail. She had no money. Well, she was lucky she had a father who had some money. She was part of a large family. They spent all their money on boats, and then she just had to hope to be asked to sail for other people. And in the single article, long article that she wrote for the, what's it called, the yachts, the Sportswoman's Handbook, she just spoke out that sailing gave her, she wanted to sail by herself. She didn't want any man there telling her what to do. She said because sailing in this way gave her the feeling of mastery, the sense of independence, which is so often denied to our sex. And I thought, yes, Barbara, you've nailed it. But about slightly less than 100 years later, I find Naomi James absolutely inspirational, just because of something she said when she was remembering being up to her mast off Cape Horn, spending about 2 days trying to free a jammed bolt because her mast was about to come down, there was a storm brewing, she was in extreme circumstances. And her takeaway from that was that although she knew that she was surrounded by people who believed in her and loved her, so they were sort of invisible there, she was on her own. There was nobody except herself who could do this. And she said it gave her an extraordinary extra strength. And since reading that from Naomi, I've tried it myself a few times, and I thought, Jewel, there is nobody else to do this. You've got to do this. You're on your own. And it really works. And I thank Naomi for that. But then there's many of these women in this book I would like to thank. Tracy Edwards particularly. wonderful woman, took so much stick, so much insults, and was so, well, yeah, insults. The maiden crew were called a tinful of tarts when they joined the Whitbread Round the World race. Everybody laughed at them, but was actually actively hostile to them. So they weren't invisible, they were visible and they were disliked. And her bravery and her financial bravery, borrowing the money, mortgaging the house, mortgaging the boat to do what she wanted to do, I think she's absolutely inspirational. She remains inspirational.